So thank you for attending this session, and I'm very happy you're here. What we're talking about today is a brand new working group in OASIS called Lightweight Verifiable Credential and Schema and Process. Trust me, we tried to get a shorter name. It did not work because the name wanted to reflect what we really wanted to do. So who are we? So my name is Abbie, and I am representing OASIS in this presentation. I am the OASIS Identity Trust Co-Chair. If you don't know about OASIS, you know, we have some slides at the end that we can talk about it. But if you know SAML was developed at OASIS. So, you know, OASIS and oasis.open.org is the website. And it's a very old standardization organization that really worked on a lot of XML and identity standards. And I happen to work for CVS, but as I said today, I am working as an OASIS ID Trust Co-Chair. My colleague, Kim Hamilton Duffy, she's the Director of Identity Standards at Center Consortium. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Kim Hamilton Duffy, Director of Identity and Standards at Center. I've been in decentralized identity standards space for a while in building products. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Okay, so as I said, the Lightweight Verifiable Credential Schema and Process is a brand new working group in OASIS, and it's part of the Identity Trust Members section. What really promoted this work? Why we are here? The last summit we had, me and Kim met, it was the ARIA, Accountable Digital Identity Summit. It was in March in San Francisco. We had a very nice open one day that had a lot of presentations related to digital identity, decentralization, and verifiable credential. The common theme that we had during that day, it's okay, you know, we're doing verifiable credential to ease the role of how a user interacts with your line party. You can hold your credentials, you can hold it in your wallet. End of the day, how far have we gone there? What we concluded that there is a lot of friction still in this model. Although the intention is good, the actual reality is not there yet. There is a lot of patterns where the user have to do with your line party. Every line party you go to, you still have to go the same dance, the same ceremony, over and over again from user perspective. You will present one set of credentials here and another set of credentials on the other website that may have some identity attributes that are the same or not. But from a user perspective, there is a decision making, there's friction. From a relying party, it has to deal with multiple credential types, credential schemas, and the task is on the relying party to try to understand the credential. And if this task is not done at the relying party, eventually the wallet will assume that role. If the wallet assumes that role, we got us a problem because now the relying party has to trust the wallet, especially once you start packaging credentials and attributes. We need a simpler way. What we have noticed is like the way the technology decentralization is advancing and it's becoming complex as far as I'm concerned. Although the intention is to really ease and get away from the traditional central model, we're doing too far what the web services interoperability did for web services about 20 years ago when the SOAP protocol and stack was developed. After a while, we were in the WSI, we did not know what something meant. We had to talk to each other to understand. And we are maturing quickly toward a lot of density. We need simplicity, we need for adoption, and we need, you know, the adoption. Adoption comes with simplicity. So the question becomes, how can we go forward with all the fragmentation that we have, with good intention, to a faster way to get where we want to go? And this is why this TC was born. The idea behind it is, how can we keep it simple? We can get the adoption done, and what the minimum credentials that we can use and develop that everybody can use. End of the day, regardless of what we think, you're going to go to a relying party, federation will go on the back end, because this is where the business relationship is. You cannot ignore the business. It's a relationship. You go to a relying party to do what? Not to say, I'm here and I want to be the center of my federation. You're going to get onboarded. After you get onboarded, you're going to have to ask for a service. the service does not come from one. There is a chain of transactions. And so you as a user, you don't want to keep interacting with each relying party. And if you do that, you are leaking PII data all the time. We want to do that where we enable the user component, reduce the reliance and leakage of PII, and then we go into the federation on the back end.
Can I have the slide? Do you have the slide thing?
Thank you.
So bringing up the specter of SOAP is the way that we scare you into being delighted by a much easier way here. So what we're proposing as part of this technical group is to define a lightweight credential schema based on verifiable credentials. And it's really optimized for a pattern, a common pattern we've seen in which an issuer issues a VC when a subject has completed the steps of a defined business process. And so the VC subject can present the VC to a relying party who chooses to accept or not based on knowledge or its trust in the issuer and the issuer's processes. Now, two immediate questions come to mind. The first one is, doesn't this just sound like VCs and decentralized identity architectures? The problem is, as Abbie was teeing up, verifiable credential data model is very lightweight. It can express a wide variety of credentials: government identity documents, employment, learner records, and movie tickets. So the problem comes in connecting the dots. How can we be sure that an issuer is issuing a credential that the subject then custodies and takes to a relying party? The next question is, what do we mean by lightweight? We mean a lot of things by lightweight, but the core of it is that by focusing on this category of use cases, we're able to establish a very fit-for-purpose schema that minimizes the amount of personal data that's required, also minimizes the requirements on the wallet, like doesn't necessarily assume the wallet supports ZKP type of capabilities. So the goal with our work is to develop the schema, and really it is to encourage alignment among issuers that in turn improves portability for subjects and decreases the lift for relying parties. So minimizes the amount of variation in schemas that a relying party has to understand, hopefully reduce the need to negotiate back and forth between, how can I as an issuer issue a credential that I know that you can use. And so we're going to use this working example of a verifiable credential issuer issuing a credential that attests that the subject has passed its KYC checks according to a country's jurisdiction, such as the United States, but it doesn't include the details of the checks. So the name, address, et cetera, is omitted, but the concrete steps involved are discoverable, available as linked data, et cetera. And the relying party can choose to accept or not based on trust in that issuer, trust in that process, and any other decisions behind the scene. Now, if you're deeply familiar with KYC and financial regulations, I hope you're squinting at this because there are some problems in what I say that we'll come back to. So the main goal is to establish a minimal baseline that can be layered well with other efforts. So we don't want to reinvent what anyone else is doing. We want to define something that's layerable, composable with other efforts. And we want, part of this TC, the goal is to work together with other participants interested in this use case to define what this minimum baseline should be. And the slides will be available at the QR code at the end. Okay, so let's come back to this example of KYC. And I'm focusing on KYC just as a working example, but we'll show you next some wide variety of use cases that we find this useful for. So the scenario is that Alice has completed KYC checks at her bank and also seeks to register for an online service from a fintech company. So today's world is that Alice has to repeat the KYC process, re-upload this identity data, and so with now with VCs, decentralized identity generally, we could imagine a world where the bank issues a credential saying Alice has passed its KYC checks without revealing sensitive details, and the fintech company or relying party could choose to accept or not. Now, the problems immediately that happen, which we've been touching on, is that there's potentially different schema, syntax, and semantics across the issuing banks. And then the other problem is that the requirement, due to regulations, the requirement for this relying party may vary depending on jurisdiction and specific compliance requirements. So where we are providing additional value is to offer this baseline schema and pattern that would be consistent across issuing banks, and also clarify this stackable layered approach for issuers and relying parties. So say, as a regulated entity, in this example, the relying party may need to collect additional PII from Alice. However, with this approach, we clarify what that basically breakpoint is, so that ideally the relying party, this approach reduces the amount of additional personal data that the relying party needs to request, and then also saying that additional identity claims can be provided as layered or stacked credentials while still expediting onboarding. So again, we don't want to go through these in depth, but here are some other example use cases that we've seen this pattern in. And so we find this very useful in general. I'm going to hand back to Abbie to go through related work.
Thank you, Kim. So as we said, we are not inventing things new. We're taking things that are existing and abstracting it. Okay, we want to make it usable. Keep it simple. This is the scene. Okay, so we need to give credit here to a lot of other activities and work in this area. Okay, in particular, Anil John, with DHS. Anil did pioneer a lot of the funding for these initiatives and promoted it. The Anil John use case is on multi-vendor interoperability, and actually their use cases are immigration, green card, and import-export, the whole official trade system. So they require they have tough requirements, and consistency and interoperability is important for them. So those type of credentials tend to be heavyweight credentials, because you need to make sure the integrity of the process across all. But the end of the day, those credentials could be simplified to enhance adoption. The work, as we said, we're not really worrying too much about the efforts like in Hyperledger or not. We're going to focus on the verifiable credential as done by W3C. That's the data model that we do. We know it's an abstract layer and comprehensive, so we're going to work and piggyback on top of that. We know about the work in the IF, the manifest and presentation layer. We will also piggyback on that. We intend to liaise with all of those organizations and also attend their meetings if we can, and we invite them to come and work with us. The other points that we want to work with, and if you have went to the AIC in Munich last week, Verifiable Credential, we're up and running everywhere in most sessions. So we will be working on the OpenID. And remember, there is no C, there is no OpenID Connect. This is just OpenID. We're going to look at their verifiable credential. They look good for transport mechanism for the credentials. So we're going to rely on that and their verifiable presentation. Although we're going to try to abstract where the verifiable presentation become lightweight, not hardweight, if the credential is easy to process. Okay. So that's the whole approach here. The OpenID Connect for identity assurance is critical and key for us, because it's built on the NIST 863, and we cannot, to make it portable and enhance the trust without having a governance system. What we're missing here, a global governance system for decentralization, is not there, and there's not going to be one. End of the day, you're going to trust, and people work in herds. So within an industry, one entity will become the center of trust, and you rely on it. So as long as those OpenID for Connect for identity assurance, like we can pre-publish, these combinations of assurance, this is profile 1, profile 2, and so forth, where the credential creator can pinpoint to it. the verifier, okay, and the issuer can just rely on that. So everybody, before you use the credential, you know the conditions of the credential. Parsing and getting the work delegated to the wallet is going to end into having problems. Once the wallet fails, the process will end crashing, and then the user will get frustrated. So in our flows, we cannot reach dead ends. That's the killer of adoption of a technology. If a consumer try to do something and they cannot, they get frustrated. So we don't want to be there. So simplicity is the way to go. And I forgot to add the Trust over IP Foundation, and they do great work here. Kudos to to you guys. And so we will add it for the next version of, So there is the DIDCOM protocol, but again, the DIDCOM is the transport for the DID. So what we're trying to do is use DID web as much as we can, and standardize the resolution of the DID, make the DID document to be very good. And also, I want to acknowledge Kalia. Kalia had a very nice paper on verifiable credential and what they mean. And I encourage everyone to read them because she pinpointed on the need. So we were inspired by all of this work to do it here. And we're not doing it in isolation. I want to also make one key point: interoperability versus portability. Interoperability is good, but it defeats what we want to do as a movement. Interoperability favors the big guy because they got the muscle. They talk to each other. Portability helps us succeed because the credential is portable among wallets. The more wallets, the simple wallets, the better off we are. And this is how you bring balance, and let's not forget that. And we want to open the system. We don't want to do all this decentralization, and at the end of the day, you're going to go back sign in with Google using your verifiable credential. It's not good. Sorry, Google, but we don't want that. It's not good for anybody, okay? So I don't think I got myself in trouble yet, but so this is the benefits, guys. Reduce cost, user is adoption today. That's what we want. Adoption can only be used by simplicity, and I know that I work with high-tech group. My group is sophisticated, and there is a lot of questions on this. It's a new technology. Okay, look at the passkey. A lot of questions on the passkey, although it's an evolution, right? But it's something different than what people use. So we need to really hit the road and succeed. So where we are, we are not in isolation. We are not going to do anything on our own. Everything we can do or being done somewhere else, we're liaison with those organizations. And so we are the pink here. We are anchored on W3C, but we understand, the whole ecosystem here. And eventually, we will send this to, with the assurance levels, hopefully we will send it to the ITUT to standardize it as a big, acceptable profile. So, this is what we want to do. And this is our co-founders, Thank you all, guys. We have big companies here, and I did not add more. There is a lot more companies that also joined the TC, I encourage you to join the working group. And where we are, we started March 31st. May 12th was the call for participation. Next week, June 8th, is the launching of the TC. So, you can join us from there. And OASIS background, I think I don't have too much time. You can find OASIS where it is, if you have questions, ask me. And this is the QR code. And by the way, since we're using QR code, we have secure QR code protocol from OASIS that ensure that it is secure. So I encourage you to use our previous work too. So that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Abbie, can you get involved in the technical committee without being a member of OASIS?
If you are an individual, you can sign in as an individual. Okay? So. Yes.
So this lightweight schema, as you mentioned, is there any also process of attestation behind that? For example, to find out whether this schema is a proper one or not, or the policy procedures behind it, or how does it work?
I can talk to that. So I'm not sure if I heard all of it, but essentially the flow is like the verifiable credential schema is just identifying the DID subject and whatever key metadata, the date, et cetera. But then the definition of the process can be available as linked data. You know, I'm saying linked data, but we don't imply that you have to use JSON LD versus whatever. But so the idea is that this pattern of saying, you know, there's a defined business process, here are the checks that were passed, and they are here, gives a fixed point to make something auditable, and also, you know, if there are you know, liability agreements required, whether that's bilateral agreements or through some governance framework, it provides the necessary starting point to actually use these in the wild.
Roman?
So, I'm just clarifying my understanding. So there's no PII in this credential, right? If a particular verifier needed that PII, that can be provided in another separate credential, right?
Yeah, I can take this one too. So there's several patterns it could support. One would be, yes, layered stackable credentials. The other pattern that we've seen in the wild would be identity or services where they're saying, here's the credential and here's a callback for additional information. So we're not really endorsing that necessarily. I'm just saying that's an example use that this could also support and fit within.
Yeah, because, you know, we need to level the field. If you have a credential, you need this service, they can keep asking you, the verifier. If you really want this service, you're going to release your state. What about, you know, I'm in the US, but which state, you know, it's not needed. But if you have a persistent relying party, because it's a code of honor on how you handle this. We don't have a reference model or rules and regulations yet. You know, we don't have governance. Now you cannot govern a huge infrastructure like that. It has to be trust anchors, circles of trust, and we want the small player to get a chance, not the big player, because we default to what we want to solve, and this is the key. Yes.
Follow-up question. So, as you mentioned, this lightweight schema, so for example, this is basically to the relying parties. So, if they are dealing with more than many trust service providers, for example, or like, you know, or multiple wallets, for example, so how is there any way they store the schemas, or how do they discover the schemas? How do they, the relying parties, discover the schemas? Is it via OpenID, the configuration, you know, so are different protocols they're using? So, is it restricted to some protocols, or is it
do you want to start? Okay, I can start. Yeah, so you mean in terms of the overall, like the exchange protocols, transport, all that kind of business around the actual exchange of a verifiable credential? Is that what you're referring to?
Not really. So, I mean, the relying parties has this access to this schema, right?
Right.
So, they maintain it, or, you know, so when they're dealing with different parties or different wallets, for example, where they get their credentials. So, and each and every party can have different types of schemas involved with it. So, do they have any, like, a discoverable mechanism which they follow?
Right.
How they, yeah, we will figure that in the TC. The idea is we're going to use schema.org, okay, and then we will follow a process to update and maintain. You know, you can have the way to say this is the original schema and then an extension if you want. It's still TBD, but, you know, join the TC and help us there. That's what I can.
Yeah, and one thing is that this is based on work that we did at, well, as part of Verity, which is the open source reference implementation. It really applied to fintech, decentralized finance kind of scenarios. And so we saw it to be very useful across a range of financial use cases. Then I'm talking about Abbie, we saw a lot more use cases. And I think, you know, so we have a hypothesis of what we think that it might look like, but we want to open it up more broadly through actual standards process. And then, yes, so to your point, we do want to release that schema, but the overall structure we expect to be somewhat like that. You know, whatever that baseline schema is, that part should be common. The variation is in terms of like there would be all these different defined business processes depending on your use case, et cetera, but hopefully reducing the lift, at least in terms of parsing semantics around what this credential is.
Yeah, I think we are heading to the next. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks.